We weren't even decarbing. We didn't even know what that was. It was decarbing in the oven while it was cooking. Like
Oh my
that's
gosh.
what was happening. So
Welcome to Living in the Weeds, a series that explores the lived experiences of neurodivergent people who consume cannabis, with your hosts, Jessica of Jessica Riley Writer and Lucy of Lucy's Natural Remedies. Today's guest is Tesha Lawrence, aka Girly with a Side of Cannabis. Tesha is a social media manager and virtual assistant, and an edible recipes developer.
thank you so much, Tesha, for joining us. We're so excited to be able to talk to you and get your take on neurodivergency and cannabis. So if you don't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself to the crowd, your name and job, and how you got into all of this.
Yeah. So hi, my name is Artisha. I just turned 30, literally like less than a week ago. I live right outside Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. But I actually am originally from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I actually grew up right outside Ocean City, Maryland, and Maryland just legalized. So excited.
I'm in Bethesda, so I'm very excited here.
Oh, no way. Okay, cool. I didn't know you were in Maryland. That's so sweet. Yep. So I can't wait to visit home soon and enjoy that,
Yeah.
So down here in North Carolina, I have actually been a pharmacy technician for over a decade, so I have my licenses and stuff. But I left UNC, where I was working, to join the cannabis industry down here probably over a year ago. I worked in 2 retail spaces here, and it was a very interesting experience working in the CBD industry down here in North Carolina, and it led me to becoming a virtual assistant / social media manager. So I've been doing that over a year in the cannabis industry and a few other niches as well. So I love it. It's really great. Along with doing that, I love to cannabis. I love interpreting as well. So like analyzing cannabis flower. I'm all into cannabis. So it's a really big interest of mine, and it's a huge part of my life. So
we all love cannabis. So we're glad to have you a part of the show and get you something. So I was kind of peeking around a little bit on your Instagram and on your sister page. It looks like edibles is your main form of consumption. Is that a fair thing to say?
Most of the time, yes. I do cannabis a lot, like for family members and friends. But I do eat edibles. I do enjoy flower as well. So I typically like to smoke flower and like dry vape it as well.
Nice. Yeah, I gotta tell you, with edibles, it's usually hit or miss for me. So at least with THC edibles, with CBD edibles, I have my own line. But the THC ones, it's usually like either they just aren't working or I pass out. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, like you don't have to convince me to take a nap. It's really not that hard. So, like,
we gotta find that sweet spot for you.
Yeah.
I feel like you gotta get that spot where you're literally feeling great, but you're not sleepy. Unless that's what you want, you know.
Well, tell us about the first time. This is my favorite question to ask people, is tell us about the first time you got actually high, because sometimes the first time you try it, you don't. And then tell us about the first time when you connected how cannabis was helping you with your neurodivergency.
Yeah, so the first time I ever actually got high and actually felt it, I was actually in college, smoking with some friends of mine, and it was just like, I don't know, it just like did something to my brain. I was like, oh my God, I've never felt like this before. Like, where have I been, honey? Like, it was just a really unique experience, you know. So it started when I was 18. And then I would say around when I was like 19, 20-ish, when I was like smoking with friends, I had just had this like, I don't want to say it was like an epiphany, but I had this like, I guess you could say I was like roommating, thinking, and I just realized that every single time I smoked, it gave me clarity, like about my life and like things that like I typically wouldn't think about, like sober. Like it gave me a new perspective. So I was just like, wow, this is really a helpful thing, like compared to, you know, things I've been told my whole life, you know, how people personally feel about cannabis and stuff.
Oh, I can definitely relate. For me, it was also freshman year in college when I first finally like felt high. And it wasn't probably until like a couple of years into college when I was smoking regularly that I felt almost like somebody came and organized the files in my file cabinet in my brain.
Yep.
Right. It's like I would feel like I would wake up in the morning and feel completely overwhelmed. And let me know if this is how you felt, right? Just executive dysfunction would set in. I would find myself sitting on the couch. I couldn't eat because I was stressed out from the anxiety of it. And then I would smoke. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I only have 2 classes today. I don't know why I'm freaking out. I can go ahead and write the paper that's due next Wednesday. Like it's somebody just kind of came and just went.
Yes.
And that's not what they told me cannabis was going to do.
Right. You're like, this is totally new. I did not expect this. Right.
Yeah. So, share with us a little bit. Like for me, I have ADHD with definitely some symptoms on the autistic side. I have been officially diagnosed with ADHD, but not with autism. So, but for me, like things like sensory issues, which I think are more prevalent in the autistic community, emotional regulation, I think does fall under both, but you definitely see it a lot on the autism side. What are some of the symptoms that well, I don't want to use symptoms because that has a negative connotation. What are some of the characteristics in your personality have you found that cannabis ends up kind of like helping with?
So Lily, basically same thing you just said. So like sensory issues, like certain fabrics and things like on my body feel very interesting. And I've noticed too, like the more older I get, I'm always changing clothes throughout the day. And I'm always like hot, I'm cold, I'm hot, I'm cold. Like I'm always just like doing something. So like that's like a really, really like big one. And I could definitely say emotional regulation too. That's a very huge one for me too, just with sometimes not saying, when random life things happen, but sometimes I'm learning to be more selective with the responses I give certain things.
So tell me then, for me, like anxiety was one of the issues that I would deal with. I was talking about time management. Sometimes 5 minutes will feel like, 3 hours. Sometimes it'll feel like 2 seconds. Like just now when I was getting ready, like I was asking the little wizard in the room whose name I can't say. I was like, okay, so what time is it? And they're like, it's 10:57. And I'm sitting there and I was just like halfway done with my makeup. I'm like, how am I going to make these 3 minutes work for me?
Or that's like me, like trying to get places like on time. I feel like I'm so early and then I'm just waiting and I'm like,
Jess does that too. She's
yes,
like,
team always early. Yes, if I don't show up 10 minutes early, I'm freaking out that I'm going to be late.
I can't. That is it's a joke that I will be late to my own funeral. I just think karmic forces will align the way they've done my entire life to be like, oh, whoops, the Hertz took a left instead of a right, like that will happen.
I mean, you got to take the best for last though. I mean,
but most people I know don't really consider me to be the best for the last one when they're waiting chronically. Like I have friends who know me for long enough that they give me a different time to arrive. Yeah. So that's how bad my time management can be. I haven't found that all cannabis helps with that. Sometimes it actually makes it worse, right? And so it's all about, like you were saying earlier, finding that sweet spot. I journal to be able to help me figure out like which one it is and which one it isn't. Like I have a journal that I created to help people know what information to pull out to make it quick. Because the last thing you want to do, at least when you're a neurodivergent, is add another thing to your to-do list, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've all bought a journal, right? We've all been like, this is a journal that's gonna save my life, right? This September, I'm going to be organized, right? Like start of the school year kind of phenomenon.
Journal collects dust.
Yes, it definitely can collect. So what do you use to be able to help you find that sweet spot?
So it's really funny that you mentioned that. I actually recently started journaling too myself, like within like the last few months. And it's funny, I saw a TikTok a few months ago talking about like having like a routine, like having like a set routine for like morning and night that really helps you out, like can help you stay on track, getting your tasks done and just being more organized. And the person had suggested, they were like kind of similar to like when you were in elementary school, like how you had like an agenda to like use like your planner in that similar way. So I actually have like a digital planner on my iPad that I use daily to like do my to-do list. It tracks like all like my food, finance stuff, like tracks like literally like your whole life. So it's really nice to have like that there. I can go there every day, track everything. I'm a big visual person too. So it's nice and pretty and colorful. I have stickers and stuff on it too, to make it really cute. So that really helps out a lot. I'm a list girly. I gotta have a list. If I don't have a list, I don't know what's happening. I don't.
I find that
not written down, it's not real.
Yes. Agreed. Yep.
I use the back of envelopes like chronically. Like it's like I had this resistance to having to need that tool to help me. And instead I would just take like the envelopes and write on
Okay.
like the bills or like whatever would come through and use it that way, which was great because that felt like just like an immediate crutch.
Yeah.
And when I would smoke, I would lose it. So like I had to like, find ways like to like keep it all together.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about the edibles, because like for somebody like myself who has not had much success with THC edibles, what are your like magic concoctions that you figured out? Like is it using a lot of CBG in your cooking in addition to the THC that's helpful? Like walk us through that process.
It really depends like on like the person. I try to ask like my family and friends like from their personal preference if they have anything like in particular that they like. I like using, with me being here in North Carolina, I use hemp derived THCA, which falls within the legal limits. And honestly, it's been no different compared to what I've had in like legal states. So it works amazing. But like I will combine that with CBG, CBD, a few other, herbal plants and stuff too, just to make different things for people, oils and stuff. So it really just depends. Me personally, with my pharmacy background, I know I can't like recommend or say anything because like I'm not a doctor or anything, but I like to tell people like for dosaging, like if you were like to start like 5 milligrams, and then if you need to just go up 5 milligrams every time, if you're able to, just until you find that sweet spot to see like what works for you personally. Because I feel like, I don't know, if you try a lot at once, I feel like that's when you get knocked out. Unless, like I said, unless you want to fall asleep. That's what I personally noticed myself.
Yeah, I used to have like the magic numbers seem to be between 30 and 40 milligrams. But earlier this year, I had an accident. I ran into a post and gave myself a concussion on 420. And the sad part is that I wasn't even high. But ever since then, there was like this moment of clarity that I had. And it when I was feeling the concussion symptoms, I felt like I was stoned out of my mind, right? And I realized that the high levels of THC that were in the flowers now was having an impact. I don't know if that's something that you're seeing in North Carolina or if that's just kind of, for me, it's like if I was used to drinking a glass of wine every night when I come home from work, right, to relax. What if somebody replaced that with Everclear and I was none the wiser, right? Because that's what it's been feeling like a little bit. I would be used to smoking, 4 or 5 bong hits, which was like, that was my consumption method of choice back in the day, was like just bong rips left and right.
Yeah.
Now it's more joints and pipes.
Okay.
A little bit more subdued. But it's like if somebody came in and just doubled the level of THC.
Yeah.
And the impact on my neurodivergency symptoms and characteristics have been like crazy, right? Like the anxiety, the paranoia, the emotional regulation became almost impossible. Have you seen anything like that, or are you like sensing anything like that coming to North Carolina? Because this is, I feel like, something that the neurodivergency community needs to be aware of, because we're learning that higher percentage does not necessarily mean better.
Because everyone's body tolerates it well. With it being medicine, like just from me, like I said, pharmacy perspective coming out right now, there's so many different, milligrams of medications and prescriptions you can get, so I feel like similar with cannabis too, everyone's tolerance is different. So everyone is going to tolerate a certain amount, depending on how they want to feel, So I feel like North Carolina, I feel like they hit or miss. Like I said, with that loophole and that THCA, like I said, with it falling through, a lot of people are starting to really jump on it.
Yeah.
I know that they were talking about possibly doing medical and stuff here, but I don't think anything had moved in the General Assembly the last time I checked, like a few months ago. So I don't know. To me in my head, I'm just hoping North Carolina will do something, because it's like Virginia, Maryland, it's like all these other states around you are kind of,
So let's talk infusions. You share a lot of your creations on your Instagram account, Girly with a Side of Cannabis. Are edibles a hyper fixation for you, using one of our neurodivergence buzzwords?
Yes, I love making edibles, and I'm a recipe developer too. So I love like looking at recipes, creating my own recipes, and just spending time experimenting and just making new things in the kitchen. I love to eat. I'm a big foodie, so I love to cook. I've been like that my whole life. So it's just I like using cannabis because I feel like it's just another way to enjoy food. So,
Are you doing more savory stuff or sweets?
I do both. It depends on how I'm feeling. Yeah, it depends on how I'm feeling. I like a lot of savory stuff, like for like meals. So I love like canna Alfredo and like infused pastas and stuff, and like infused pizzas. Those are like my favorite things, like infused savory wise. But then sweets, I really like doing like cookie bars, brownies, cupcakes, and ice cream. Oh, and chocolates. I'm a big chocolate girl too. I know how to make chocolates.
Ooh, chocolate is not easy. That's the skill.
Yeah. Tempering chocolate is I'm not gonna say it's a pain in the butt, but it can be. It's very, I'm not gonna say it's hard to learn, but it's a skill. It definitely is a skill to learn.
Well, no, congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the ice cream in particular. I've had CBD ice cream before, and that was kind of interesting, but I didn't really feel like I felt the effects. And that's kind of like the problem with CBD edibles. Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't feel anything. And you're like, that's because you're relaxed and you're happy. And there's probably some kind of inflammation going on in your body that you were not aware of was existing.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, between me and you, the CBD stuff that I use and like have tried, I need to have like a good amount, like 150 plus milligrams of CBD for me to like, feel like relaxed, like just like with my tolerance level. So yeah, I could definitely see like ice cream having a little amount of CBD, I could definitely see that. But yeah, infused ice cream, if you make it really strong, like you can infuse it a few different ways, like with the milk and sugar and stuff, it can get pretty potent. It can be very potent.
What's the best or the hardest part? Give us the best part and the hardest part about making homemade edibles.
Best part, being creative in the kitchen, like just letting my creativity come through, and just like I said, looking into new recipes, finding new flavors, and combining things just to see how it turns out. Hardest part personally, because I do have a tester machine. I have a T-Check tester machine here at home to test my infusions. Nice. So that is kind of hard with trying to make treats for people's tolerance levels, because everyone's tolerance level is different. So every batch, depending on, my oils and my infusions I make, it's going to be different. So that's kind of like a interesting, thing I've been dealing with lately with trying to infuse batches for people, because I want to have a wide variety,
And for your endocannabinoid system, what is the best infusion balance, like in terms of percentages? You mentioned that you use a little bit of CBG with your THC. What do you find helps you the most with your neurodivergent characteristics?
So I like a 1-on-1-on-1. So THCA, CBD, and CBG.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Together. Yep, I like that a lot. I like that. Like, I think it's really, really good. And my fiance, he actually has diabetes. He actually takes a CBG tincture daily that I make him. And he's noticed like a difference, like with how he's been feeling like the last few months, like with his body and stuff, like with him using it. So
yeah, I feel like CBG is like the sneaker cannabinoid that's out there that people are we're gonna, like 2024, that's gonna be the cannabinoid that everybody wants, because especially in our community, like you're not the first person with who's neurospicy, it's like what I like to say, that has noticed that CBG helps. And it's not something like where you're feeling like euphoric and stoned and like but you're also not anxious, you're not tired. For me, like my t-shirt, I don't know if you can say it, it says terpene. Strain names come and go, terpenes are forever. And so because I had noticed originally like such a trend for me with things like limonene and pinene. For a while, limonene was a terpene that really worked for me. I absolutely loved it. I was like sativa girl all day long, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to convince me to take a nap. So like, it's also, I think, like my stress defense mechanism. I don't know about you, but when I feel overwhelmed, I'm like, I'll take a nap and that'll solve everything. I'll wake up and either like it won't be an emergency anymore because I've calmed down, or because I missed the deadline. Like one or the other is going to happen, right?
Yep.
So how about you? What have you noticed, like in terms of which terpenes are working best for your symptoms? I keep saying symptoms, and I'm the one that doesn't want to call it symptoms.
So I'm a big sativa girl too. So I love limonene myself.
Yeah.
It's a really, like big one of mine. I actually a while back had saw someone online talking about limonene capsules. I don't know if you know that they come in capsules. Like you can actually take like liquid capsules of limonene, like with like the actual like extract and stuff, and they work really good too. Like
that's a good detail. I personally have discovered that with the THC levels increasing, so have the percentages of the terpene levels. That one actually, it took me a minute to figure it out, but it triggers my anxiety and a paranoia in a very intense manner. Lots of people say that happens with them with pinene, and I actually have the opposite experience. I'm like, no, that's the one that makes me feel like I can go walk through the forest. Like,
oh, really? Yeah, I've never had, I don't think I've ever experienced anxiety, and I am an anxiety girly. I've never experienced anxiety like with any sativas, and that's why I love sativas so much, because it keeps me like focused. Like I am like alert. Where like I get sometimes some indicas make me like kind of like paranoid a little bit, I've realized.
It's so funny and cool the way everybody's endocannabinoid system is so unique, you know? Like I remember when I worked at a dispensary, I kept trying to explain to people, I was like, just because this works for me in this manner doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work this way for you. Like I have a friend who's had a lot of spinal surgeries.
Okay.
He smokes Grand Daddy Perp on the daily. And there's a soccer mom, like goes and picks up kids and drives around the minivan and is completely coherent and like awake. And I can't go near that stuff because it will knock me out, right? And it's amazing to me how the body changes.
I actually have like, so with me, like actually I'm taking like some interpening. I never can say it right, but I've been taking courses.
Interpening, is it from who's it from?
With Trichome Institute.
I did that. It's a really, really good course. I went to it was like a 2-day conference that they had here in Maryland for all of the dispensary workers back in 2017, I guess it was. And since then I went back and I took their other courses that they had. Max was incredibly knowledgeable. Like the amount of information that you're going to get from those courses, like hands down, I definitely recommend.
I love them. I bought them all. So I've gone through Cannabis for All, Cooking with Cannabis, and I think there's a third one I've done, but I'm still working on the interpening and then the one with the lab extraction stuff. I'm still doing those two. But yeah, it's a lot of information. It's very helpful. And the Cooking with Cannabis course too that they came up with the American Culinary Federation is phenomenal. I actually had downloaded more books because they actually have a separate certification by themselves, the American Culinary Federation, where you can get like a Cooking with Cannabis or like an edible certification with them. So I actually want to do that soon too, to like have that certificate. But it's amazing. They go very in depth, like with Cooking with Cannabis, with dosing, and just like very like knowledgeable about like having like I guess you could say like special events like dining and like educating people. They like go really in depth with that. It was very nice. It was a very nice course.
I make lozenges, full spectrum lozenges, using my family's 200-year-old family recipe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we have ties to the first homeopathic pharmacy in Lima, Peru. Yeah, it's a really amazing, like cool, like, oh my God, I can't believe like this. Yeah, but of course the lozenge recipe that was passed down to me did not have any like fatty components to it to be able to have you digest it. So that took a little bit of finessing on my end to be able to figure it out. So that's amazing news about the Culinary Institute giving that certificate, because that just goes to show that more and more people are starting to understand like, hey, this is happening. You can either get with the program or be left behind on pharmaceuticals and destroying your liver and your kidneys while you're at it.
And you have to dose people correctly, you know, just like with alcohol, or I don't want to say any substances, you know, because I guess I like to say it is a medicine, but I just feel like you still have to dose people correctly so that they have the effects that they want. You know what I mean? Like me personally, I'm not saying I would feel wrong dosing someone, you know, too much and then they feel bad, or it's not the effects that they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that information is needed. You know, it's very needed in the community.
So speaking on that, how you mentioned that you have a lab system. How do you measure your dosage with your homemade edibles?
Yeah, so I have a T-Check. It's actually like a little like tester machine, and they actually have an app. So you like open the app, you select whatever type of infusions you have. like coconut oil, olive oil, a few different other things. And then they actually have an option where you can decarb, or where you can, I think, do decarb flour. You can actually check your decarb flour to see like how like potent that is. You have like a little like test vial thing that you put your oil on and you just put it in there and it measures it up, and then it'll tell you like how much THC, CBD, any other cannabinoids are in there, and it goes off of by I think teaspoon, then it goes up to tablespoon, and I'll tell you how many milligrams are in there per tablespoon.
Let's definitely get that information so that we can put it in like the summary, because I'm sure a lot of the people who are going to watch this make homemade edibles, and like I didn't even know that that was available. I know a lot of people struggle, myself included, with the costs of going and getting your products tested, because it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And if you're just doing small batches for yourself, you're not going to send it off to the lab. But
yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it's convenient having it at home. And like even me personally, I'll run a few batches just to like double check it, just to make sure like it's correct. And it's usually spot on. Like it's not like different or anything like when I check it multiple times. So it's been fairly accurate, you know, with me using it for the timing. It's really nice. But yeah, I can definitely give you more info so that people can get them.
So edible versus smoking, how do you balance the two?
Oh, I love them both. So I personally love to dose layer. Yeah. So like I love to I love having an edible at night sometimes, like to help me wind down, and then I'll smoke too after that. I'm a bong girl, so I love having bong hits. I
also like layering when I'm doing the edibles, and it's again usually for sleep at night. Like the layering effect is definitely something that just kicks it to a whole new level. I had a friend once who described edibles, because he's like, I like having edibles because then my pinky toe gets stoned. And I said, come again? And edibles were hard to come by when I was in college. There would be like the occasional brownie, right? But like, again, like this is it's embarrassing to talk about. I mean, like there would be actual leaves and sometimes stems and stuff in the brownie. Like people just did not know what they were doing, right? Yeah. There was an internet, but it wasn't really like as informative as it is now. Mm-hmm. And so like, yeah, you just put the weed in it.
What do you mean? Like
just in there? You know, me with some of my autistic traits is very literal, right? So I was like, okay.
You're like, literally? It's
like, and then the day that I found out that canna butter existed, I was like, we can make butter.
She's like, we don't have to physically eat it anymore.
Literally physically eating the weed in edibles, okay? God, sorry, I can still picture like taking a and like seeing like a chunk of a nug in there, like because we did grind it up, but like you would still eat, like it just, that was a weed brownie. So
through and through. I mean, really, that yeah.
So do you use canna butter a lot? How are you infusing? Is it oil? Because I know you can do oil, you can do butter. What's your preferred way of infusing your edibles?
Yep, I do oil and butter for the most part, but I mainly stick with coconut oil. I just like using coconut oil. Yeah, if I do butter as of late, I actually have been doing the method that I learned from the Cooking with Cannabis course. So what did they do? Is they do like ghee, like infused ghee, and then you add, I think, heavy cream back into it, and you whip it, and then it actually gets the consistency of butter again, which is really cool. But yeah, mainly coconut oil for the time.
That's brilliant, because ghee is so much easier to infuse than butter.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yep. It's a process. I literally like make ghee myself. Like I separate the solids and stuff too. I don't buy ghee. Like I'm like, nah, I'm
girl.
Yeah, I make it myself.
You're like, dang, you should switch culinary school for reals, because like I remember I bought, like at one point when I was trying to figure out, like I knew I wanted to do some kind of edible, and like I was still tweaking the lozenge recipe, trying to figure out what I would use in there, right? And I was like, what about ghee? And I was like, no. Immediate no on that one.
That's actually, I mainly use ghee for the most part. I usually don't typically just use straight butter, like at all, using. Yeah, it's ghee to me. I'm not saying it's more stronger. I feel like it's more potent. I don't know if it's just my personal preference when me making edibles and stuff, but I feel like it's been stronger compared to when I've done it infusing straight butter like in the past.
Do you think from your pharmacological perspective, do you think it's because the bioavailability is so much easier for our bodies to be able to process it through ghee, or like?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I'm assuming so, because I know like compared to like butter with ghee, it's like removing the milk solids, which that is like water, if I'm correct. I know like a good amount of water is in that. Yeah. So I could definitely see that, like with your body absorbing it, too. I could definitely see that. That definitely makes sense. I never thought about that, Lucy.
I'm not a scientist. I've just been smoking for a really long time. But yeah, so back to Aaron and the pinky toe getting high. What he was trying to explain to me in the fish show there was that your body gets high, right? It's a body high as opposed to just like a central, focus up here, like your brain getting foggy. Have you noticed that? And there's some edibles that you think give you more of a body high than others, or it just depends on what you're working with?
Yes, I have noticed some strains do get you couch locked compared to others. I have noticed that. And I try to ask like my friends and people, like when they do one trades, I'm like, how are you trying to feel? Or what are you trying to get done? Like I try to, be mindful to see, and I do like look up strains too, along with me testing them. I look them up online and like try to do like as much research that I can, just to tell people too, just so that they know. So yeah, I've noticed with some infusions in the past, some of them have knocked me out more than others. I definitely can say that.
Yeah, I found that if it is something like a savory edible, that is going to be more likely to knock me on my ass than a sweet treat. And I'm not sure, again, if it's because of whatever fat soluble that is being used to make that cannabis bioavailable, right? Because you can't use ghee in candy, right? You can't really use butter in gummies. Like you end up having to use some other fat component that your body may or may not be able to process as much. So I can see how, like, if you're using, coconut oil, I think can be used universally. Like I use MCT oil. I use extra refined with with a little bit of that and sunflower lecithin because it needs a powdery form.
Sunflower lecithin.
Yeah. in the Trichome Institute, because I also have troubles with that word. They talked about how terpenes and edibles are kind of like a shaky ground because we still don't quite understand what happens to terpenes when we cook them, right? Because they chemically are altered. And so it's hard to say, okay, limonene is going to make you feel awake when you smoke it. And we already know that the effects that you feel vary based on your consumption method, right? Like you could smoke a sour diesel joint and have a completely different effect from a sour diesel tincture. Have you, like, and a backup question is, are you using terpenes in your cooking? Like what, have you noticed any kind of difference in terms of how terpenes are working or not working the same way? And are what terpenes do you think are the best ones to work with?
So I have not noticed a difference yet. And I do want to actually start infusing like terpenes into my food. I have not done it yet. I've just been, the most part, just been like decarbing my flour, with me extracting and doing it that way and just using it. But I do want to add them back in. I actually want to learn a little bit more information about that because I know you have to be really iffy about adding certain terpenes in with other ones because then it can get kind of not funky, but it can get kind of iffy a little bit. So yeah, I'm trying to do a little bit more research on that too because I do really want to add them in to see if it makes a huge difference. Because I personally have had some gummies lately too, like from some companies that were terpene infused, and I noticed a difference.
Yeah,
like, I noticed a difference compared to like a typical like THC-esque like gummy. Like having the terpenes in there, like it really provides you with a different experience.
I think I'm going to follow your advice and say that it still is a good thing and that we should go ahead and keep looking into it because there's got to be ways for us to be able to use the magic of terpenes because it's part of the puzzle. Like we can't just take out a piece of the puzzle and expect it to still look the same, right? Like
Yeah.
what advice would you give to people who want to start making their own edibles at home? Like they have particular symptoms on their neurospicy character profile that they're like, okay, anxiety. How can I alleviate the anxiety that I'm feeling? What recommendations would you have for somebody doing an edible at home?
Yeah. So them personally making it at home, I would suggest for them to do as much research as they can about different flower types that can help with the anxiety. And, depending on where they're at, like legal state, or if you're in a illegal state, just trying out different strains, just seeing like what you can find, like in your market, depending on what you're looking for, sativa, hybrid, indica. And I don't want to say experimenting, but I feel like in a way you have to experiment, unfortunately as it is, because, everybody's body tolerates cannabis differently. So you have to just kind of just experiment a little bit and just, see how it works for you. But I would definitely suggest that, just like starting, can't go wrong with that.
What is a foolproof recipe that you've come across for somebody who's just starting out? And not grinding up the cannabis and putting it in the brownie mix, because I can tell you that does work. But it's not
very, very herbal, but it doesn't.
We weren't even decarbing. We didn't even know what that was. It was decarbing in the oven while it was cooking. Like that's
my gosh,
what was happening. So, yeah.
Did you feel anything from them?
Yeah,
you did. Okay.
Like, because it was like the recipe called for an ounce.
Oh my gosh.
That was another reason why it was few and far between.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was just like biting into like weed.
That's a lot of weed to mix into your chocolate.
Because I'm just saying, with my infusions, typically I do like a quarter per cup. So I have done an ounce per cup of oil, and it was strong. Like that was like the strongest infusion I ever made in my life. And I was like I was using like dropperfuls of it because it was so potent. Like I'm like, this is gonna knock everyone out. But that, oh my gosh, I know they were potent.
Yeah, but remember that this is back in like 1997, 98. So the weed had like maybe 10%, 12% THC to it. And it was brick. So like, what I was told is that it came from Mexico, right? And it came all the way up through Texas, through to Virginia. Wow. So by the time it got to us, it was like dirt weed.
She's like, it was dirt.
Reggie would have been a step above what we were smoking back in.
Oh, wow. That's being nice.
Yeah.
That's so funny. So an easy recipe that I could suggest for people, like I guess with infusing coconut oil, I guess with something that you already have at home, I love cake mix cookies. That's a really quick and easy recipe to make, or like brownie cookies, just using like a box of brownie mix just to make cookies and stuff at home. And I like freezing cookies too. So like if I don't want to eat the whole batch that I infuse, I just freeze the dough balls, vacuum seal them, and they're good in the freezer for a little bit. So then you could just have it edible whenever you want it, anytime. So
that cake mix cookies, I've never had those. Those sound pretty yummy.
Yep, you can do like all different sorts of flavors. Like I love strawberry crunch. That's like my favorite, like a strawberry with strawberry crunch. It's so good.
Okay, well, I am hungry now, and it's lunchtime. Tisha, thank you so much for joining us. And Girly with a Side of Cannabis is your Instagram handle, right? So make sure to give her a follow. And see you again soon. We appreciate your time.
Yes, I appreciate y'all inviting me on. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
You're welcome.
It was wonderful to chat with you.
Oh, thank y'all.